Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, dropped 69.9% in its second weekend. That is the largest second weekend drop in MCU history, the largest second weekend collapse for any superhero film that opened above $100 million. A week after audiences showed up, two-thirds of them told everyone else not to bother. The Marvels made $206 million, total worldwide. That is less than what the original Iron Man made in 2008. Between 2022 and 2024, Marvel released 9 theatrical films. 3 were considered genuine failures by any studio standard. 5 underperformed. The average Phase 4 film lost audiences between Week 1 and Week 2 at a rate that had never happened in the franchise's history. Stan Lee described exactly why this was going to happen. He described it before the MCU existed. Not Phase 4 specifically, not streaming fatigue or COVID or oversaturation. The mechanism, the structural error, the specific thing Marvel stopped doing after Endgame that Lee spent 60 years explaining was the entire point. Today we're breaking down what Lee actually built, what Phase 4 actually abandoned, and why the correlation between every success and every failure maps perfectly to a single rule Lee wrote down in 1962. That is why I am 99% certain what Lee actually said. We tried to make our characters as human and empathetic as possible. Instead of merely emphasizing their super feats, we attempted to make their personal life and personal problems as realistic and as interesting as possible. We wanted to make them seem like real people whom the reader would like to spend time with. Stan Lee said that about Marvel's founding philosophy. He expanded it constantly. Just because you have superpowers, that doesn't mean your love life would be perfect. I don't think superpowers automatically means there won't be any personality problems, family problems, or even money problems. That is the entire formula. Not one sentence of it is about powers, mythology, or spectacle. Peter Parker fails a math test. He cannot pay his rent. The girl he loves does not notice him. He got bitten by a radioactive spider and gained abilities beyond comprehension, and the most important fact about him is that he is still a nervous teenager who cannot catch a break. Bruce Banner cannot be close to anyone without risking destroying them. Tony Stark in the comics destroys his own company through alcoholism. The powers are the costume, the person is the character. Lee's insight was that the powers created the plot. The person created the story. Readers come back for the story, not the plot. Marvel built $30 billion on that distinction. Then they forgot it, what Phase 4 actually did. The Eternals are immortal celestial beings who have lived on Earth for 7,000 years. Lee said the audience needs to see themselves in the hero. 7,000 years old, immortal, created by gods, no rent, no failing grades, no family drama that does not involve godhood. 10 of them, introduced in a single film, each defined primarily by what their powers are. The film gave audiences mythology when Lee said to give them a person. Thor, love, and thunder, Gore the God. Butcher is the most tragic villain the MCU has produced on paper. A man who lost his daughter to a god who did not care, and whose grief turned into a war against every god that exists. That grief should be the film's engine. The film plays it for laughs. Thor's own grief for Natasha, for Tony, for the version of himself that died twice, is set aside. What remains is spectacle and comedy. It made $249 million less than Ragnarok. Kang the Conqueror, the MCU's announced Thanos replacement. Thanos worked because the snap affected every person in the audience personally. Someone they loved was gone. The loss was immediate and human. Kang is a multiversal threat whose stakes are existential and abstract. You cannot grieve a timeline. You can grieve half the universe. One character is a personal problem. One character is a mythology problem. Lee told you which one works. The pattern, film by film. Here is the part that convinces me 99%. Phase 4 had 8 failures and 5 genuine successes. Every success followed Lee's formula. Every failure violated it, without exception. WandaVision, grief, the most human emotion that exists. Wanda losing vision, a person, not a power, and building an entire television reality around the inability to accept it. 6 Emmy nominations, the highest reviewed MCU project of the post-Endgame era, Shang-Chi. A man whose father built him into a weapon and whose entire arc is about choosing to be a person instead. Family conflict, identity, the specific weight of being told who you are before you had a chance to decide. 132% over opening weekend projections. No Way Home. Peter Parker, specifically losing everyone he loves. Not the universe, not a timeline. His aunt, his identity, the people who knew him. The film is about the cost of being Peter Parker, which is Lee's formula run at maximum amplitude. $1.9 billion. Wakanda Forever, grief again, actual grief. Not a plot device, not a villain's motivation, but a film about a family and a nation processing the loss of someone irreplaceable. $859 million, the highest Phase 4 theatrical gross. Now the failures: Eternals, Mythology, over Person, Quantumania, Cosmic Scope over Scott Lang's human relatability. The Marvels, 3 characters whose emotional journeys had been told in streaming series most of the audience had not watched. The film assumed the personal stakes rather than building them. Secret Invasion. Nick Fury, reduced from the most compelling human operator in the MCU to a plot function in a conspiracy thriller. In every case of failure, the powers, the mythology, or the threat became the focus. The person was secondary. Lee wrote the rulebook. Phase 4 used it as decoration. Why people got the diagnosis wrong. The most common explanations for the MCU's decline: streaming fatigue, too many projects, Disney content overload, COVID changing viewing habits, Endgame closing the arc so completely that nothing after it could build momentum. Every one of those factors exists. None of them explains the pattern. Shang-Chi came out in the middle of the streaming era and made $432 million. No Way Home came out 14 months after Endgame and made $1.9 billion. Wakanda Forever released 2 years into the post-Endgame era and made $859 million. The films that followed Lee's formula worked. The films that did not work were the ones that built from mythology and spectacle. The streaming era and content overload and COVID are real conditions. They do not explain why some Phase 4 films succeeded by massive margins and others failed under the same conditions. One variable differs. Lee told you which variable matters. What Marvel is doing now. Fantastic. 4 First Steps made $521 million. Reed Richards in Gunn and Watts' version is not a mythological genius. He is a man who has been so focused on being right that he built a family he then almost lost. The film's central tension is not the Silver Surfer or Galactus. It is a family under pressure, making choices that cost them something personal. Lee's formula applied correctly. Superman made $616 million. A person whose goodness is tested by a world that punishes it. Not a mythology, a person. A Doomsday trailer running in the same period is drawing more pre-release attention than any MCU project in 3 years. Its central character is a grief-driven man who lost his wife and child and is rebuilding reality so they can live again. That is not a cosmic villain. That is a human tragedy wearing a villain's architecture. The course correction is happening. It is happening in the direction Lee described. The 1%. I said 99%, not 100. Here is the 1%. Phase 4 also had production problems, leadership disruptions, a writer's strike that affected post-production on multiple projects, and the specific challenge of following Endgame, which was a cultural event as much as a film. Any of those factors could account for some of the decline independent of creative philosophy. The 1% is that 1 or 2 Phase 4 failures might be explained by those external factors rather than Lee's formula specifically. The 99% is that the correlation between personal stakes and box office success in Phase 4 is too consistent to be coincidence. 8 outcomes, 5 successes, 5 followed the formula, 3 failures, 3 abandoned it. That is not noise. That is signal. Lee described the signal in 1962. Marvel listened for 40 years. They stopped listening in 2021. The numbers changed immediately. He died in 2018. He never saw Phase 4. He did not need to.